Good afternoon from Athens and Happy New Year. This is the first function of our institute for this year, and I'm delighted to welcome so many good colleagues from different parts of the world, from the UK, from Turkey, from Israel, from Cairo, from Greece, Cyprus, and so forth. Ever since the invasion of Russia to Ukraine back in 2022, there has been mounting concern about the energy supplies of Europe. We have all witnessed the disengagement, the gradual disengagement from Russian oil and gas supplies to Europe, and the search for alternative fuels from all different sources. In this context, the East Mediterranean, and of course Southeast Europe at large, are playing an important role. From studies that ourselves as IENE, but also other institutes, think tanks, international organizations, and what have you, we have identified different sources of energy which are available in our broader region and could help Europe. So one of our prime concerns is whether the energy deposits, the energy potential of a region could be of use and could ultimately help European energy needs, including oil and gas and electricity. With this issue in mind, last July, we completed an important study on the various energy options of the East Mediterranean. And this study, under this title, Energy Options for the East Mediterranean, is available through our site, it's freely available. And in that study, we expand on this issue. We identify the energy resources of the different countries, and we discuss the actual issues which can help or prevent the flow of energy from the East Mediterranean to Europe. Following publication of this study, we did not have the chance to address this issue to a broader audience. And this is what we're doing today, with the help of the authors and the help of trusted and very knowledgeable colleagues. We will today try and discuss this issue, exchange views, identify the pitfalls, identify the positive angles of this, and try and see where East Mediterranean energy stands in relation to the rest of Europe. One of the main findings of the study is that although East Mediterranean is surrounded by a lot of energy, has indeed a lot of untapped energy, especially hydrocarbons, has the potential to produce a lot more electricity and hence be able to export this electricity. The infrastructure, but also the political relationships are not there to help facilitate such an eventuality. This does not mean to say that specific efforts and openings to that with this view in mind have not been made. As a matter of fact, there is a lot of cooperation between the countries in the region. We have the tripartite Israel, Greece, Cyprus, the other three-party Greece, Egypt, Cyprus, and of course we have collaboration, direct collaboration between Greece and Turkey, with Turkey being one of the main players, I would say the major player in the region. And as a matter of fact, we as an institute, we are very much positive and well inclined to such cooperation, to the extent that 2 years ago, in April 2023, we convened in Istanbul, in cooperation with Turkish colleagues and partners, a one-day conference on Greek-Turkish cooperation in the energy sector. So this is not a fantasy. There is cooperation. There is the basis for cooperation. We focused at that time on electricity. We focused on gas. We focused on renewables. And of course, we avoided certain contentious issues because we wanted, such as the delineation of the sea borders, etc., because we wanted really to explore the positive aspects of such cooperation. So cooperation in the region is there, but it needs to be developed a lot further and along more well-defined routes to be able, in the medium term, I wouldn't say in the long term, in the medium term, to be able to synchronize all this different energy potential and try to channel it towards export routes. This does not mean that energy exports do not take place from the region towards Europe. We see that in electricity. We see that in limited amounts of gas. And we have the prospects for hydrogen exports. And we have the prospects for a lot more electricity exports if and when the necessary infrastructure comes into place. So, to summarize, on the one hand, we have the need for more infrastructure in electricity, in gas, in hydrogen, and that will be long-term, especially hydrogen. But the other ones are short to medium term. And of course, on the long term, oil and gas. We have brought together today very well-known and knowledgeable experts from all different countries who know their area very well, and they can tell us more on these very issues. So I will not say more. I will pass the floor to Kostis Economopoulos, who was one of the principal authors of our study on energy options for the East Mediterranean, to make a short presentation of the study. So we have a background which we can refer, and then we will go to the second part of the webinar, which John Roberts will kindly moderate, and that will include the view from the different countries. And then we'll come back at the end for a roundtable discussion. It is a little tiring because everything is crammed within 3 hours, but I think it's worthwhile because today we have a unique situation, we have a unique opportunity where all these different actors from the different countries come together. So, without any further ado, I will ask Kostis Economopoulos to take the floor and screen share his presentation. Kostis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Stambolis. I'm really happy to be here with you all today. Let me just bear with me for a second so I can share my screen. I hope you can all see my screen now. So again, I want to thank you all for being here, and I want to wish you all a happy new year and prosperous new year to you and yours. My intention today is to present you with the key points of the study that was compiled last year. And to do so that today, I'm going to have a few points that have been updated from the publication of the study. So a lot of the things you're going to see here today are updated, especially numbers. So without further ado, I want to start off where Mr. Stambolis, I want to pick up where Mr. Stambolis stopped. A couple of introductory remarks as to why we compiled this study. So with the war in Ukraine and the disengagement of the Russian gas that has to be done in Europe by 2027 and the gas imports, the energy supply options for Europe have been narrowed down. We need to find out in Europe other resources, other routes for energy supply. And to do so, we have a few options. With natural gas being needed over the next 30, 40 years or so, there's a few options that Europe has. First of all, it can scale up its imports from the existing suppliers like Norway, Algeria, and Azerbaijan. This is already happening. So this is the first option. The second option is to increase LNG supplies, which is also happening. And the third one is to encourage gas exploration and production, especially from regions that are close to the continent, like the East Med region. So this is where the ENS study came in order to find out and to assess the existing and the potential power energy resources, be it hydrocarbons, renewables, hydrogen, and electricity, and how, as Mr. Stambolis said, if the East Med can become a major energy producer and exporter to Europe. Hopefully, this webinar today will spark a discussion and bring some results in that matter. So what's the importance of the region? Well, first of all, you see this region is at the crossroads between the Middle East, North Africa, and Europe. It's a location acting as a choke point and a gateway at the same time. But also it's in a very dangerous belt, shadow belt, as we say. It's at the moment it's between two conflict areas in Ukraine and in the Middle East, and the proximity, and it's also next to it's next to major energy producers like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran. So we have to bear in mind all these factors which we were discussing about the importance of the region and how that can become an exporter. Also, the East Med has a prolific hydrocarbon resources, as we have seen, especially further east. We've got Europe nearby, an energy-thirsty Europe, and a high renewable potential, especially the sun and the wind. But it's also a quite diverse area regarding demographics, politics, and economies. I'm not going to go through all these numbers, but it's easy to understand that we have a mixture of developed countries like Greece, Cyprus, Israel. We've got emerging economies. We've got countries that are within the EU and countries that are not in the EU. We've got political tensions and countries with difficulties to run, and the energy has to be used as a tool for peace and prosperity in the region. When it comes to oil and gas exploration and production, again, we have a kind of diversified region here. We've got a couple of four countries, to be precise, that are in a stronger position, like Israel, Egypt, Turkey, and Cyprus. We see that they have pushed ahead with their exploration and production, especially in Israel. These are updated numbers, by the way, as compared to the study itself, but you can download from the internet. And we see on the other side of the spectrum, we have a much weaker position, although it's starting to pick up again, specifically in Greece. In Lebanon also, we had a recent award in January 9th, the award of Block 8. Syria is in a situation where the war has caused most of the oil and gas infrastructure to be destroyed, yet the efforts are now underway. As I said, Greece has been picking up pace the last year or so, a couple of years again, especially after the 2020 sort of change of strategy regarding the oil and gas. Now it's picking up. There's 4 blocks pending approval. The blocks that were awarded to Chevron, and approval from the Hellenic Parliament. In regarding oil supply and demand, Egypt is the main oil producer in the region, producing roughly 600,000 barrels of oil per day in 2023. Turkey is also an oil producer in the region, but as you can see, these numbers are not enough. So the region is a net oil importer. So regarding oil supply, the numbers need to pick up quite up. On the other side, natural gas is in a lot better position than oil. Israel being a significant gas producer. In 2023 alone, the country produced almost 25 BCM and exported almost 50% of that, mainly to Egypt and Jordan. However, there is no direct link to the international market, and that, of course, can change either by the EastMed pipeline or via Egypt with other LNG plants. Egypt, on the other side, production in the country has declined, and the LNG exports stopped back in 2023. The balance has been achieved by imports from Israel. In 2023 alone was almost 9 BCM of gas imported. So Egypt needs to pick up pace again regarding production in order to help its own demand and perhaps export the gas elsewhere, specifically to Europe. So that's a question that needs to be answered at some point. Can the EastMed become the major hydrocarbon supplier to Europe? The decision is that by 2050, natural gas consumption must be down to zero and needs to be entirely phased out. Consumption in the EU in 2023 was 330 BCM, while in 2020 it was 394 BCM. So it's been phasing out. However, anticipated gas demand output from this is becoming relevant in order to answer these questions. And given the last change of policy, as we see, decoupling from Russian gas, then and the high RES renewables penetration into the electricity system, these numbers need to be revised upwards. So in order to answer this question regarding hydrocarbon supplies to the EU, a lot of discussion needs to be made further on. And this is where the gas corridor in Southeast Europe comes in. This is the expanded gas corridor that has been expanded towards the west, Balkans, from the previous gas corridor, which was mainly on the eastern side of the peninsula. These pipelines can bring, especially the East Med pipeline, can bring gas from the East Med all the way to Greece, and from there onwards north and northwest to Europe. Over here in the square, we can see the existing pipeline infrastructure in the East Med. The dotted line, the East Med, of course, as you know, the East Med pipeline is not currently in place. Discussions over this pipeline are still going on. So there's some future in that. Regarding electricity, there's power generation. Supply of electricity in the East Med needs to be uninterrupted. As mentioned before, cross borders and cross-border connections and the grids need to be updated in order to export the electricity that it's been generated in the region. We've got discussions with Saudi Arabia and Greece regarding electricity from that region of the world, of that region. So electricity is also one way of adding to the game in the exporting side of the region. These are just a snapshot of the installed capacity in the countries that were studied in our publication. So we see that, excuse me, we see the electricity interconnectors that are currently being implemented in the region. We have the major Great Sea interconnector from Greece to Cyprus and in Israel. We've got GREGI interconnector from Egypt to Greece. We've got the Green Aegean interconnector from Greece all the way up to North Adriatic. So this the Euro-Gulf interconnector, of course. So this electricity interconnectors will play a major role regarding the electricity exports from the region all the way to Europe. Again, just a quick reference here on the new renewables. The region has a very prolific resources, renewable resources, wind and the sun. The targets, especially Greece, the targets are quite ambitious, especially in Greece. At the moment, the electricity was produced from renewables in the country was about 50%. Turkey's percentage was slightly lower at 40%. Turkey is a rising star regarding geothermal energy, and it's currently ranked fourth in the world. Israel is aiming for 30% of renewables in power generation by 2030. It was less than 7% in 2020, and Egypt is also aiming for over 30% of renewables in the energy mix by 2035. Oh, it's not changing. Yeah. As it was mentioned by Mr. Stambolis, hydrogen is also going to play a role more further down the road in the future. Greece has hydrogen goals. Turkey has hydrogen strategy goals. Egypt's got ambitions as well, and they all come down to pushing forwards with installing the the electrolyzer capacity, emphasizing on production, green hydrogen production, all of them. But this is something that is going to play out further down the road in the near and long-term future. Some energy security parameters. I know John Roberts and the rest of the professionals today are going to delve into this matter, which is an important aspect that needs to be considered. But just to touch upon what the security parameters are in the East Med, we've got external threats, tensions in the Gulf. We've got instability in the Red Sea. The Russian-Ukraine war impacts regional security, energy security, and we see causing oil spikes. We see rerouting of targets, of tankers. Then we've got the regional dynamics, how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict played out. We've got Turkey and Greece tensions. And then we also have the Israel-Egypt gas relationship. Then we go to, we have disruptions. We've got sanctions. We've got European gas supply agreements between countries such as Israel, such as Egypt, such as Azerbaijan. These are all things to need to be taken into consideration. And of course, we've got impact from prolonged conflicts, especially in Gaza, and things that have played an important role regarding energy security in the East Med. So some key messages that I want you to take out from today. In order to understand the region, we need to understand the geography, which is of paramount importance. We need to take into consideration the major energy producers in the broader region, which is Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Iran. We need to understand the choke points that are in close vicinity, like the Gulf of Suez, the Suez Canal, etc. And also we need to consider other potential producers that are nearby, like the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea. So we had a question whether the East Med can become an exporter to Europe. To do so, it must increase the hydrocarbon activities. Greece is left behind, but it's picking up. For example, Egypt needs to has a reduced gas production and needs to pick it up. And of course, the region needs to make use of its high RES renewable potential. As mentioned before, of course, regarding electrification, the electricity grids need to be upgraded, and especially in view of this energy transition in the region. And of course, cross-border electricity interconnectors need to be accelerated. And just a couple of key points that need to be key questions that hopefully they will spark the discussion later today, but also in the long term. Where does Saudi Arabia fit in? Can it export electricity? Can it export via Jordan or via Egypt? And what about Iran and Iraq? How these two countries will affect the regional balance, especially with Iran in a turmoil currently. We've got, as mentioned before, we've got different cultures, we've got diverse economies, hostilities, some of them are never ending. Can this change? And how will cooperation between such a diverse mixture of countries be successful? Also, the role of Turkey. We see over the last few years, Turkey being drifted away from the West. Can it return? Will it return? And what about the relations between Turkey and Iran, which have affected the EU-Turkish relations? Then we've got Cyprus-Turkey, Greece-Turkey relations. Another major point is that Turkey is not willing to follow the UN law of the seas. Can there be any regional cooperation with Turkey? So all this is food for thought. Hopefully, the discussion later today will try to touch upon these points. And with that, I want to thank you all for your attention. And I urge you to download from our website the full study, which is comprehensive and it has all the information that were discussed today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Kostis, for going through the study. And as Kostis said, it's the full study is available. It has a lot more information and details and references, and it's, I think, worthwhile browsing through it because you can find a lot of information. So now come to some questions and answers on the presentation. So if there are any comments or questions, now is the time to ask them. Anyone? Now I see somebody in the chat room. No questions so far from the audience.
No, I think we can move on. Yes, Mr. Stamboulis.
Yeah. Do you see any questions? I don't. Okay. Now, one thing myself I'd like to bring up is the question of electricity interconnections. As it was mentioned in the study, there are some projects under development, like the Greece-Cyprus-Israel interconnector, known as Great GSI, Great Sea Interconnector. This is a fairly mature project because it is literally one step prior to construction, well-funded from the EU and from the transmission operators. There are bilateral agreements specifically in the project, an agreement with the European Union, which is funding this to the tune of something 650 million, almost a third of the budget, which is one of the highest grant contributions for this type of project. Another project, less mature, but very much on the map, is the Greece-Egypt electricity interconnection. And another project which is on the map is the second Greece-Italy interconnection, which is going to be double the capacity of the existing interconnection. And again, this is on schedule. It is supported by both transmission operators, Terna from Italy and IPTO from Greece, also recipient of certain EU funds. So EU is trying to facilitate interconnection because they see places like Cyprus and Israel being part of the general European electricity grid. So from EU's point of view, it is absolutely necessary to expand this grid southwards and eventually have a bridge towards Asia. GCI will be able to do this in a small scale by linking Israel to Cyprus and Cyprus to Greece. Greece is already connected to Turkey more than 10 years, and now plans are being made to double the capacity because in very short while, Turkey will be able to expand its electricity exports to the region, thanks to the Akkuyu nuclear power plant, which is coming on stream later this year. And this leaves countries like Syria, which they need to upgrade their connections to Turkey, and why not tomorrow to Israel. And then, of course, we have Egypt and Israel, which are already interconnected. So these are, though, small interconnectors in the sense that they're capable of providing balancing services between the grids of the two neighboring countries. But in no way can they accommodate much higher, much bigger loads, especially if these are to be sent to Europe. Hold on to that, because IPTO, the Independent Power Transmission Operator of Greece, is already has in plans in the draft board. They have plans to organize a huge electricity cable up to 9 gigawatts to take electricity from Greece and Egypt north to Austria and then Germany. As an institute, we had the opportunity to work on this project last year. So we know that this is not a fantasy, but this is an actual project. If it's going to be built, that's another question. But IPTO has this down as one of its plans, and it's going to come into stages of 3 gigawatts at a time. So therefore, the first phase will be 3 gigawatts, then 6, and then up to 9. The issue here is that there is a belief that in a few years, the region that is Greece, Egypt, will be able to provide excess electricity in huge volumes and low cost to export to Europe. Now, this is very much in question because the finances and the economics are not that clear. But I have to mention this because this is the way things go. So we're talking about the need of other big projects if we're going to utilize the electricity, the excess electricity, or say anticipated excess electricity from the region up north. Of course, it may work the other way around because, as Charles will tell you in a minute, Egypt is very short in terms of indigenous power. It is already importing gas. Why not import electricity? Because although agreements could be in place to export, if the country needs more electricity, it will take this from, it will lift this from local resources. So such interconnectors could operate both ways, and we could, when they are ready, we could see them working in a reverse mode. It's not bad because interconnectors, they make up their money by transmitting electricity both ways. But to have a certainty that in a few years the region will have excess electricity to export is an assumption right now, a very welcome assumption, but nevertheless an assumption that needs to be tested in practice, in the field. Now, I don't want to take any more time from the speaker presentations, which will follow, but this is a point to take into consideration. Just put this on the back of your mind because it will come again and again in the discussions as far as the role of East Mediterranean with regard to electricity exports to Europe. So if there are no questions, and I don't see any questions, I now hand over to John Roberts. And John, you take on your role as moderator and also make also all the introduction, which is very, very useful, and we're looking forward to it for the next session.
Kostas, thank you very much indeed for inviting me to the webinar. I will make a few remarks, but I think first of all, I'm just going to say we've got 6 participants with us. We've got Nikolaos Stigleris, who's coming in from Cairo. We've got Charles Elenas, who'll be speaking on Cyprus, Korkan Yardim, who is an absolute expert on matters Turkish, Yanis Grigoriou, one of IANE's partners, and also Dr. Amit Moore from Israel, and my own colleague, Julian Bowden, who is a visiting research fellow with the OIES, who will be talking again about the East Med and Black Sea. I'm going to start, though, with about 5 minutes of my own remarks. And Kostas, if you will tell me when my 5 minutes is up, that will be good, because we need time for discussion. I'm going to start with the war in Ukraine. This is a very strange war. On the ground, Russia makes tiny advances, snail's pace, and suffers enormous casualties. But the other main aspect of the war, given that the human cost is, of course, the biggest aspect, is the war concerning energy. The focus by both sides on denying energy to the others. This morning, or late last night, President Zelensky declared yet another state of emergency. Why? Because of the massive attacks on power installations and distribution that have caused at the moment more than 400 housing blocks in Kiev to be without power at a time when temperatures are between 10 and 20 below zero. In other words, Ukraine faces a major domestic energy crisis. At the same time, Ukraine has had success in attacking Russian energy installations. We have seen that Russian energy exports, including pipeline gas, pipeline oil, and notably pipeline oil products, have gone down consistently over the course of the last year. This is not the reductions caused by Russia's own termination of gas supplies to Europe. This is the result of physical attacks on Russian infrastructure, coupled with increased sanctions on Russian energy institutions. So what we have to answer are 2 major questions. The first concerns Ukraine. What happens to Europe's energy balance and the way in which its networks operate if Ukraine constantly and consistently suffers not just energy shortages, but energy blackouts and terminations? The second is what happens if attacks such as the Ukrainian attack on the loading facilities in Novorossiysk are sufficiently accurate and sustained to deny Russia export routes, not only for oil, but also potentially for gas in a southward direction. Now, what this does is, first of all, it throws an increasing emphasis on energy produced within the region or that is to be produced within the region. Obviously, the East Med is going to play a major role, one hopes, in boosting overall European energy supplies, but I'm going to leave that discussion to Kostas Oikounopoulos and to Julian. I'm going to mention, though, the Black Sea. Logically, we should be seeing 7 or 8 BCM come online from Romania's Neptune Deep discovery in the next 3 years or so, maybe faster. We should also, if we're lucky, see the discoveries that they hope to make at Bulgaria's Han Asparuh yield something further down the line. And of course, there is Turkey's Sakarya, due to reach 14 million tons a year by around 2028. My own guess is that they will in fact be slower in reaching that target, but the point is production levels are set to rise. But there's a danger here, and the danger is a very simple one. The more the energy war intensifies, the greater the danger that it spreads. We have seen drones, mainly from Russia, but I think also possibly from Ukraine as well, straying outside the direct combat zone of the two countries and their maritime exclusive zones. How safe are the new facilities in the Black Sea from, shall we just call it, accidental attacks, ones that are at least denied when they take place? How practical is it to rely on this as a major resource? Or do we need to start thinking about more active forms of defense? And then there's the question of how do we supply Ukraine? The vertical corridor coming up from Thessaloniki becomes all the more important. The LNG terminal at Alexandroupolis becomes a key feature of security for Ukraine. But we have already had Russian attacks on the entry point into Ukraine on that line. What's more, they took place just as Azerbaijan was running a trial shipment of gas up the line. That's a warning to Azerbaijan. And of course, the EU is still looking to Azerbaijan as a potential source of increased gas supply. Though I would agree with what Kostas said earlier, that there are problems on the upstream of Azerbaijan that indicate this might be slower than expected. So where would we go from now? I think it means we have to focus on hard security much more than we did before. That means two things. One, physical security of energy installation in countries that support Ukraine. And secondly, it means we have to think about state support and state funding of major infrastructure development in a much more coherent way, because this is an potentially existential threat to energy supplies in the region. I won't go further than that, but I think it's a grim picture, and therefore anything that the East Med can do by way of increased gas delivery, electricity delivery, is obviously very clearly helpful. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much. So now, the first person that I have speaking on my list is, if I'm right, Charles Ellenus, who will, I'm sure, be focusing very largely on Cyprus, but I hope he also looks into wider issues as well. Thank you. Charles, it's all yours.
Indeed, John, I will start with the wider issues. during 2025 and now coming to 2026, announcements of new energy projects and developments in Cyprus and the East Med have been coming in thick and fast. In fact, we had almost an announcement averaging every 2 days. Underlying common factor behind many of these is, in fact, a US strategy to establish energy dominance over a wide region that includes Southeastern Europe and the Mediterranean. And this aims to bring any dependence on Russian gas, on Russian energy, Russian gas and Russian energy to an end, in fact, replaced by US energy, and stop Chinese influence in the region. US politics is no longer traditional. It's driven by transactional factors and what many people now call smash and grab diplomacy, as we have seen in Venezuela and Greenland. For the region, these developments broadly follow 5 major strands. First of all, an American strategy for the region, then energy interconnectivity, settlement of maritime disputes, Egypt's insatiable thirst for natural gas energy, and geopolitical positioning in the region by the major actors. Even though there is frequent reference to European energy needs, the unfortunate fact is that the European interest and influence in the region is largely lacking. Inexorably, Europe is playing second fiddle to the US. Under President Trump, the US has become quite assertive in imposing its transactional energy politics, as we have seen, as I said before, in Venezuela and Greenland, driven by both geopolitical goals and commercial interests in energy security and dominance. For the region, for me, the epitome of this policy culminated with the PTEC conference that took place in Athens early November, attended by 3 senior ministers of President Trump's administration, the first time in Europe that 3 of them came together at one event, certainly not in Brussels. US supermajors ExxonMobil and Chevron, US International Development Finance Corporation, and the US Export and Import Bank. In addition to them, we had most of the energy ministers of the countries in the region attending that conference. The US is promoting 2 energy corridors, in fact, a south-north corridor going all the way from Israel to Ukraine, placing Greece at the center of it, and an east-west corridor from the Caspian to Europe, placing Turkey at the center of it, as well as the expansion of ExxonMobil and Chevron exploration and production in the region. The strategy is led on the ground by especially chosen US ambassadors to Greece, Cyprus, and Turkey, and President Trump's own family. Many of these projects, of the projects announced, and I'm not going to list them, recently fall under this strand and feed the broader objective of American energy dominance. I'm going to talk briefly about interconnectivity. I think Kostis Stambolis was absolutely right to mention energy interconnectivity, especially electricity interconnectivity, as becoming an increasing factor. Energy interconnectivity includes a number of projects announced recently to improve natural gas interconnectivity between Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Moldavia, and Ukraine, based on LNG through Greece and Caspian gas, but it also includes electrical interconnectivity through projects such as GSI and GRESI. The recently announced Lebanon-Cyprus interconnection forms part of this, but that's just an idea at the moment. It has a long way to go. Energy and connectivity also includes the IMEC corridor, that even though its main purpose is economic and commercial, an important element of it is energy. GSI is likely to form part of IMEC, with Israel pushing for it as it joins GSI. And this is something that could strengthen the project geopolitically. Maritime disputes abound still, unfortunately. And even though first President Erdogan called for a regional meeting to address this, and more recently Prime Minister Mitsotakis invited countries to join a meeting to address these issues, if we're left on our own, we will not get there. We're not going to resolve them. There are too many differences to go that far. As a result, I think eventually the American initiatives will culminate with giving us a plan on how to develop, to resolve these, and even enforcing their solution in order to facilitate this American energy dominance in the region. They don't want this, Trump and the United States do not want these maritime disputes to stop energy projects. And I mean, I'll give you one example of conflict. On the one hand, Chevron has the blocks south and southwest of Crete to develop, but also wants to return back to Libya. It's actively involved in Libya now with the United States government support to return back to the region. But you can't have both. The blocks that Chevron is pursuing southwest of Crete are in, some of them fall into this disputed area covered by the Libya-Turkey memorandum. So on the one hand, you can't have Chevron operating in Libya as if nothing is happening, and then Libya also claiming part of Chevron's blocks southwest of Crete. I don't think the United States will stand up to that, and it will come and force a solution. And I'm afraid, because progress is unlikely to be achieved regionally without US intervention, that may be the outcome. The US message is, we don't want to see any party, and I quote, this is a statement made by the US administration, we do not want to see any party interfere with the mutually beneficial expansion of energy infrastructure in the region. Then let's talk briefly about Egypt's insatiable thirst for natural gas and energy. Egypt is the biggest country in the region, and is highly dependent on natural gas for its energy and petrochemicals production. Demand for gas has been increasing by about 1 to 2% per year, in line with its population growth. But faltering gas production from Zohr and Egypt's lack of new major discoveries have left the country increasingly dependent on gas imports, mainly from Israel and in the form of LNG. Egypt's needs are so great, it can absorb all free for export gas in the region. Production in Egypt over the last 3 years went down by 30%, huge. Now they have arrested that decline, but their production is not increasing. They need new discoveries, and that requires more investment by the oil companies there. Israel and Egypt signed a deal in August that effectively would doubles Israeli gas exports to Egypt, and that was ratified recently after being held by Prime Minister Netanyahu. The need for diversification forced Egypt to rely more on expensive LNG imports, and also on signing agreements to import American LNG and Qatar LNG. But Cyprus is also coming to the rescue. Development of the Kronos gas field is well progressed, with exports destined to reach Egypt early 2028. However, Egypt has already agreed to waive its own claim on any of that gas and to allow Eni to export all of it, about 5 BCM per year, to Europe. So we're going to see, in other words, the first gas from the region, from Cyprus through Egypt, going to Europe early 2028, 5 BCM per year. Aphrodite is coming behind, that there are challenges being faced, and I don't think we're going to see much of Aphrodite gas this decade, perhaps after 2030, 2031. And Egypt has been taking measures to increase domestic gas production. It has just announced 5.7 billion investments to drill 480 new wells by 2030 to reverse production declines. But I'm afraid it also has to go beyond that. It needs to negotiate new gas prices with the oil companies, because the oil companies are putting huge pressure that present gas prices in Egypt are too low in comparison to those in the global market. And that is one of the reasons why the oil companies are slow in investing into new gas exploration in Egypt, and also behind the delays of Chevron approving the development of the Aphrodite gas field. The fact that Israel and Egypt have signed a new agreement with an underlying gas price of about $7.50 per million BTU, it's going to drive that claim to extremes, and eventually Egypt will have to respond. There are also geopolitical positioning factors in the region. I'm not going to go through those. And in those, Lebanon, Syria, and Libya come into the equation. The question of whether EastMed can supply gas to Europe, I'm not absolutely sure. As I said before, apart from the Kronos gas, this 5 BCM per year, I don't see any other gas going from the region to Europe. There is not enough spare capacity of gas to feed the EastMed gas pipeline. And Egypt is in dire need of gas more than the Israeli pipeline can supply, to the extent that I don't see any major increases in LNG from Egypt to Europe. But we are going to get a few cargoes every now and then going there, but Egypt will be absorbing most of the gas of the region. That's my presentation, John.
Charles, can I ask you one question? And of course, I'll open it up to any others, which is that you have the paradox that here is gas from Kronos going to go to Egypt to supply the LNG facilities there. At the same time, am I not right in thinking that an LNG station is supposed to be opening at Vasilikos soon for importing LNG? So how do you resolve that paradox? And does that mean some Cypriot gas will go to Egypt by pipeline and then come back to Cyprus as LNG?
That ludicrous possibility is there. The amount of LNG, of gas required by the Cypriot market is too low. It's less than 1 BCM per year to justify the investment needed by the oil companies to develop the gas and build pipelines to bring it to the island. At least that's the excuse they're producing, and they're not prepared to invest in that. So as a result, Cyprus made the decision to go for LNG imports. I'm not absolutely sure that that was the best way to do it, but anyway, that's what it was decided back in 2019. But as you know, that project is mired with controversy and corruption, and I'm afraid it's at a standstill at the moment. It might come back, but I don't see that project coming back for a while yet. I don't think it will come back before 2027, 2028 at the earliest. So Cyprus will continue to use heavy fuel oil and diesel to generate electricity. But as and when that project is developed, it might import some of its own gas back as LNG, which would be a bit of a joke. At the same time, though, there is an offer by Energean to supply some gas to Cyprus from its Israeli gas fields. It has been revamped and come back late last year. Energean remade that proposal. Cyprus hasn't yet responded, and given the political turmoil in Cyprus at the moment and question marks about whether the ministers will continue being there and so on, I don't see any developments in Cyprus. Cyprus is stuck with using diesel and LNG and diesel and heavy fuel oil for electricity production.
Thank you. Now, are there any other questions for Charles at this stage? I can't hear any, and there don't seem to be anything on the chat room. So can I ask Gökhan Yardim to come in from Istanbul, I think he is at the moment, and make his presentation, please. Gökhan?
Yeah, just a minute. I have a small presentation and will share with you just to understand. Yeah, just a minute. Yeah, share. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to join you today. And thank you to INA for the study and for bringing together such an experienced group of speakers. I will keep my remarks practical and market focused. My main point is simple. In today's energy environment, delivery and flexibility matter more than big narratives. The Eastern Mediterranean has clear energy potential, but in real markets, potential is only first step. Investors and buyers ask very basic questions. Can gas be produced? Can it be transported? Can it be financed? And can it reach customers on time at a reasonable cost? So for Europe and Southeast Europe, the key is not only new supply, but reliable routes, flexible infrastructure, and regional connectivity. Resources do not automatically become supply. Offshore gas projects often take time. Permits, subsea works, financing, and long-term contracts may slow progress. Also, geopolitical risk and commercial uncertainty affect final investment decision. So the real question is not only how much gas, but also how fast, at what cost, and under what risk conditions. This is where infrastructure and existing systems become very important. The EU direction is clear. Russian gas is expected to be phased out by 2027. Everyone here already knows this, so I will not focus on dates. I will focus on market implications. Europe will need more flexibility. The Southeast Europe will need more optionality. This means LNG access, storage, and corridors that can deliver gas quickly when needed. In this context, Turkey is already connected to Europe through the Southern Gas Corridor. Azerbaijani gas flows through TANAP, supported by South Caucasian system. In addition, Turkey is deepening diversification through new agreements. A major example is the Absheron-linked arrangements. 2.25 BCM per year for 15 years expected to start from 2029. Taken together, Turkey's recent additional supply contracts, including Absheron, have reached around 18 BCM in total. This is important for one reason. It improves the deliverability of supply for the region. Turkey is not only a transit country, it is also a supplier to neighboring markets, especially in the Balkans. The BOTAŞ-DEPA long-term agreements has operated smoothly, and it expired now, 2 years ago, I think. And Greek private sector company has imported spot gas via Turkey-Greece interconnection without disruption. Also, ongoing deliveries to Bulgaria and several Balkan markets show that regional gas flows are working in practice. This is an important message. Energy security is not theory. It is a daily operations. Now, I want to focus on LNG because LNG is the flexibility tool. Turkey's LNG capacity has expanded strongly over the last decade. Daily regasification capacity increased from around 34 million cubic meters per day to 161 MCM per day. This is a major change. The system is designed to become even more flexible. Turkey's aim to increase regas capacity from 161 MCM to 200 MCM per day, and 2 more FSRUs may join the system. So LNG is not only import security, it is also an operational tool that strengthens optionality for the wider region. Storage is also critical. Turkey has ambitious but clear targets. Silivri storage is planned to reach 6 BCM by 2028. Tuzgölü storage is planned to reach 8.5 BCM by 2032. At the same time, domestic production is increasing. Black Sea gas production has already started, and capacity is expected to rise step by step. So, LNG plus storage plus domestic production creates a stronger system. And system strength is what market respects most. For Southeast Europe, energy security is built around systems, not single projects. The key words are interconnections, LNG access, storage, and operation flexibility. This is also why corridor concept matters. But the corridor should be understood as a network, not only a single pipe. In the INS study, this approach is described as the Expanded South Corridor, ESC, which is consistent with vertical corridor logic. In this wider regional system, Turkey may contribute through its existing LNG capacity, storage expansion, and interconnections, together with other regional assets. This can support balancing, optionality, and resilience for Southeast Europe. To close, success is not about narratives. It is about delivery, flexibility, and reliability. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, I look forward to you answer them.
Gökhan, thank you very much indeed. Çok teşekkür ederim. I'd just like to know whether you think that apart from the supply that you're expecting to get from Absheron, whether you think there will be much more coming within a reasonable time frame from fields like Shah Deniz or deep level ACG.
Yeah, Absheron will be a new project. You know that. I think there will be 2.20 for Turkey and 3 or 4 BCM, additional 3 or 4 BCM will be transported to Europe or Southeast Europe, where we can say through TANAP, I guess.
Thank you.
You're
Do we have
welcome.
any other questions for Gökhan? Then can I admit to a terrible mistake, which was that I was supposed to have Dr. Nikolaos Stigleris speaking earlier, but I couldn't raise him on my computer. So we now have, I hope, Nikolaos Stigleris, who is an expert at EMGF in Cairo, coming to contribute. And what we do need is an Egyptian perspective, and I hope we're going to get that this time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, John. No worries. interesting, and I think all the presentations are complementary. So I will try to share my screen. Should guide. So my presentation will focus mainly on the price landscape of Eastern Mediterranean gas within an increasingly integrated global LNG market, shaped by the factors that all of the esteemed speakers have highlighted before. So I'll try to keep it short. So I'll just go directly to the third slide. In 2025, we saw a paradox. Global gas demand grew by less than 1%, yet global LNG supply increased by over 5%, largely to offset the shrinking pipeline deliveries from Russia and Norway to Europe. As speakers have highlighted, the US has solidified its role as a titan, ending the year with around 110 million tons of LNG exports and another 55 million tons in approved projects. So LNG is no longer just a secondary fuel, it's the most flexible and fastest growing segment of the global gas market. Now, looking at price benchmarks, in 2025, TTF traded between $11 and $13.5 per MMBtu, and the Henry Hub stayed mostly between $3 and $4.4. So we're seeing a move away also from spot exposure towards mid to long-term contracts, with oil-linked formulas regaining favor in Asia and Henry Hub indexation dominating the US supply. A critical trend for 2025 was the extreme correlation between TTF and the JKM, the Asian benchmark, which reached 0.95 in the first half of the year. And this reflects, I would say, a deep global market integration, where flexible LNG suppliers and portfolio players can quickly shift volumes to capture arbitrage. Interestingly, while TTF prices fell by roughly 35% year on year due to strong LNG inflows and mild weather, Henry Hub prices surged over 70% as the US market rebounded from unsustainably low levels in 2024. This brings us to a narrowing effect. In late 2025, we have read about an Arctic cold spell in the US that pushed Henry Hub to nearly $5.5, narrowing the spread with the European benchmark to just $4. So this is significant because it reveals global gas prices are starting to converge around the marginal cost of US LNG. So the spread was below the long-run marginal costs. So I would say by 2027 or 2028, and given that the massive wave of around 250 BCM new LNG capacity will come online by 2035, mostly from Qatar and the US, we expect further downward pressure that could push spot prices toward the short-run marginal cost of US LNG, roughly I would say around between 4 and 6, I would say $5. So these are loose market conditions, and global prices will become increasingly sensitive to these variable costs. IEA analysts have noted that this doesn't necessarily mean that we will have production shut-ins, but we could observe sporadic cargo cancellations and foster a shift from coal to gas in industrial sectors. And I believe this is the price environment that EastMed must prepare for, and it puts more pressure for interconnections and for regional development. And this is maybe where state funding, as it was highlighted by John, should come into play and further support on a regional basis. Now, I would just go quickly to regional balances. I just listed some countries. So if I'm not wrong, Israel currently produces around 2.6, say 26. Sorry, my numbers are in BCM, so I would try to put it in BCM. So around, let's say 26 BCM per year. It's the equivalent more or less. With nearly half of that exported to Egypt and Jordan. Egypt, however, faces a growing challenge, as it was highlighted by Charles, and Costis currently produces around 4.2 BCF a day, and it consumes between 6.3 and 6.5 BCF a day, relying on imports from Israel and the US. Israel around 1/3, and US currently around 2/3, in order to bridge the gap. Over the next 5 years, we expect Israel to add more or less 1.6 BCF, so 16 BCM of production, and Cyprus to potentially add 5 BCM via the Kronos field. Now, despite these additions, and after accounting for the contracted and the not yet contracted transit capacity towards Ukraine through Greece, a residual gap of 2 BCM, so 20 BCM per year, remains. So this gap is currently being filled by US LNG, either from Greece or Egypt when it comes to Egypt. But this comes at a very high cost. Egypt's dependency on US LNG is a significant financial burden. US LNG is priced double and mostly triple the cost of subsidized domestic gas or pipe gas from Israel. This creates massive foreign exchange stress and risks arrears payments to IOCs, to international oil companies. So to mitigate this, Egypt is actively, and I would say even aggressively, pursuing new exploration and production activity. It tries to diversify its LNG sources to include Mauritania and Qatar. So these are deals that have been signed for starting in 2026. And this is where Kronos field in Cyprus becomes, I would say, an interesting case study for regional cooperation. So these are information that is publicly available in different trusted sources. So Egypt and Kronos have signed these commercial agreements to process the Kronos gas using the existing Zohr offshore infrastructure in Egypt and the Damietta LNG plant. So this project avoids, for sure, expensive greenfield developments and uses a tolling model with handling, transportation, processing, and liquefaction fees altogether around $1.5. Additionally, as it was said, as Charles said, we have read that there is a volume clause under discussion to waive or not to waive regarding a 20% production lift by Egypt. So but in a world where prices converge towards the viewer's marginal costs, the strategies are shifting. We are moving from maximizing high margin arbitrage for LNG due to the historic spread between US and Asia or Europe to a more cost-effective commercialization and risk-managed returns. For the case of this cooperation between Egypt and Cyprus, and eventually flows towards Europe, the Egyptian buyer, the focus is now on using underutilized infrastructure to stabilize domestic supply, rather than chasing exports. Egypt is thirsty, as we said. It cannot afford looking at exports. And how they do that? By engaging, as I said, in ambitious E&P development activity by fostering also renewable penetration for electricity generation to halve the gas demand in this segment, and also by looking for cheaper regional gas supply alternatives like Kronos or Israel, the Israeli sources, Leviathan and Tamar. So for the Cypriot producer, the incentive is to leverage Egyptian infrastructure to accelerate time to market for the project and preserve margins in a low price environment. The competitiveness window is narrow. If European prices stabilize between $6.5 and $7.5 per MMBTU, EastMed gas remains viable provided delivered costs stay below $7.5. Now, allow me here maybe a short comment on oil indexed LNG, which is mostly present in Asia. If Brent holds around $60, today's LNG contract settle at roughly $7 to $8. So this creates a price ceiling that makes Henry Hub linked cargoes commercially margin destructive. And at $7, those oil index LNG undercuts as well Henry Hub index market. Now, if prices drop even further to 5 or 6, LNG margins collapse, and we could possibly observe cargo cancellation with the EastMed gas option regaining interest regionally. We have experienced low TTF levels back in 2012. TTF was under 5. I think it was even at 3 by the time, 3.5 maybe, when we had this gas bubble due to the US shale gas boom and the dramatic demand drop following the subprime crisis in the US. So for Cyprus, viability becomes binary. Returns for projects like Kronos might struggle might struggle below 6, even if fully integrated within Egypt's system. At 7, the project is viable with shared infrastructure, but very little margin. In conclusion, I would say that lower global gas prices reinforce the value of regional pipelines and shared infrastructure. The advantage of EastMed gas lies in shorter distances, lower shipping emissions, and regional proximity, not scale. Buyers create value by replacing expensive US LNG with cheaper regional gas, and the risks for them are mainly related to regional geopolitics and upstream timing rather than global price risks. Producers derive value through early monetization, capex discipline, and guaranteed offtake. In this case, balanced risk profiles could be achieved through take-or-pay volumes, flexible pricing, and shared infrastructure, while midstream operators earn stable price-agnostic revenues via tolling, transit, and processing. I would say that it's very interesting what's happening with the Kronos deal right now, because apart from the gas project, it appears like a blueprint. It shows how the East Mediterranean can remain competitive, bankable, and strategically relevant in a world where prices fluctuate between between $6 and $8. And this is where I give you back the floor for questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Nicholas, thank you very much indeed. I'm still looking around for more questions, but I would ask one sort of general one. What you're saying with regard to price would seem to mean that there has to be a strong emphasis on using existing infrastructure better, maybe even modest expansions to existing infrastructure, rather than seeking to construct wholly new pipelines and LNG systems. Would that be a reasonable deduction?
Absolutely, absolutely, John. And as well, the need to support maybe extra development of interconnections, the choke points, as it was highlighted, in order to be able to leverage a more cost-effective gas, which is available in the region. But it receives a very strong pressure from the global price landscape in order to create a win-win situation for all the countries that are involved in it.
So if I can make a further point in this context,
John
it
has
is
a point as well.
there's a limit to how much private sector funding can come in at relatively low price levels. Therefore, maybe state or public sector investment has to be stepped up. I've made that point. Charles has a point himself to make. Charles Allen, over to you.
Yeah, hi, Nicholas. Back to Kronos.
Yes.
OIS are projecting that LNG prices in Europe, because of the glut, because of the fact that China is reducing its LNG imports, is importing more Russian gas, more Russian LNG, and is producing more gas itself. They project that prices will come down to about $6 per million BTU by 2028.
Right.
We know that the tolling fee for the gas for the use of the ZOR facilities is going to be of the order of $1.50 per million BTU. If that is the case, it leaves a very small price for the gas that Eni and Cyprus can get. Is that viable? I mean, is that project still viable? Is that going to be challenged? Because this is not a short-term thing. It's going to be a long-term thing. This LNG glut is going to last for quite a few years, and it's going to come right at the time when Kronos is about to export. So I mean, Cyprus at the least will not make any serious profits out of it. So why is it doing it? And it could even be worse. So what is your view?
I couldn't agree more. I believe that maybe Egypt is a key to this answer, because as now we see that Egypt, they import even at 12 or 14. This is not sustainable. Of course, the prices will go down, as we said, and we expect some levels of 5 or 6. But we see also that Egypt, under the pressure that expensive LNG from US puts on its state budget, they are ready to sign at levels of around 7 to 8, from what I read also in the press. So I believe it is very delicate that the narrow window of the competitiveness of the Kronos field under the current price situation, and especially by 2025, it will be between 5 or 6 and 7.8. I think at 7, I think it's a good case scenario for Egypt if it manages to contract some volumes at 7, because we expect that prices in Europe might be even lower than 7. So my point is that we need to carefully, I mean, the project developers need to carefully think of how they can diversify risks and how they can leverage all the opportunities before excluding some of these.
Well, I agree. Cyprus will be better off selling the gas to Egypt rather than to Damietta.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions coming in? Then can I thank Nicholas very much indeed, and thank Charles for contributing at that point as well. Our next speaker is Yanis Grigoriou, who is the Vice President with Continental Europe Energy Council, which is, of course, a partner with the IENE. So, Yanis, I hope you're there, and I
Yes,
hope that you're
yes.
going to come up on screen.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm
Right.
very much honored to be a speaker in this discussion, which is by far excellent. And my presentation, actually, I share with you a presentation that I had the chance to make recently in London, and I have amended for this webinar. And my topic is about hydrocarbons potential in the region. For this region, which I think is challenging, but it is the future, not for the broader area, but also for Europe. And the main question that Kostis Economopoulos told at the beginning, that how energy could be secured for Europe and for the next years, so that our civilization will continue at the same levels as we are today, and the energy needs of all the surrounding countries. And to that end, I think that what Charles told us before, it was absolutely realistic, that perhaps the hydrocarbons from the area will not be enough to be exported to Europe, or what Goham told us, that energy security needs systems. All that are absolutely fine. And I think on top of that hydrocarbons will continue to play a significant role for energy. And so I would like to tell you my view on not only on the current exploration and production activities in the region, but also the potential that there is. And to do that, I would like to include some geopolitical facts. I'm not a geopolitical analyst. Actually, I used to be an engineer and geophysicist for more than 40 years. So I don't want to be included in geopolitical discussion, but I'll express some things that I am looking there, and I think that will affect the production in the future. And I'll go through the countries from Greece, Libya, Egypt to Israel, Lebanon, and Cyprus. And this is the map of the area. The dotted lines are not borders, are geological borders. In yellow are the existing in production fields. So let's see which are the hydrocarbon promising areas. The first one is that in northern of the Anatolian Fault, which is the East Thrace Basin producing gas in Turkey, the Prinos field in Greece, but there is still unexplored areas here in Greece with a lot of gas potential. There are the onshore Greek areas, the continuation of the Apulian platform in the Ionian Sea, where are some very interesting blocks with prospects to be drilled soon. The Nile Delta, the Levantine Basin, and the Eratosthenes Mountain around Cyprus, the Mediterranean Ridge and the inner plateau around Crete, the huge Herodotus Basin, and a part between Rhodes, Crete, and Cyprus.
Yannick, we don't see any map.
You don't? You don't see my screen?
No.
Sorry. Let me. Now?
Not yet.
Not yet. Sorry. Sorry, I don't know why. Yeah, but sorry, so give me a second. Because now I cannot be. Yeah, I hear you, but yeah, but yeah, but I cannot be connected in the Zoom in my screen. I don't know why. Let me.
Your cursor go down at the bottom of the Zoom.
Yeah. The
There
thing
is a
is that
share screen there.
yeah, I know, but I cannot. I see just the wave, just you are. Yeah, tell me. Yeah, now. No.
Yeah.
Τώρα, ποιο το δικό σας? No. Ναι, είναι. Δεν το βλέπετε. Περιμένετε γιατί λέει your screen is paused. Τώρα τι βλέπετε? Βλέπετε. Ναι, το έχω διαλέξει. Αυτό βλέπω εγώ. Εγώ βλέπω την οθόνη μου και... Όχι, μία. Ναι. Το PowerPoint είναι στην οθόνη μου τώρα. Εγώ έχω your screen, περιμένετε. Τώρα.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, now you're looking at my at the map, isn't it? No.
Yes, we have the map.
Yep, we can see.
Is the map that where I was describing before?
Yes,
Yes.
with the dotted lines.
Yeah.
Okay, with the area northern of the Anatolian Fault, the onshore Greece,
The Ionian,
the
yes.
Ionian Sea, continuation of the Apulian platform, Nile Delta, Levantine, and Eratosthenes, and Mediterranean ridge with the inner plateau and Herodotus basin. Yes? Okay.
Yes, we're seeing all of that.
Okay, apologies for that, apologies. And finally, the area between Rhodes, Crete, and Cyprus, where there are strong evidence of the existence of hydrates of pure methane, and I'll come to that later on, and the Libyan offshore Sirte and Cyrenaica platform. So all that, you know, of course, all that, but I put that on a map to look at that, to be very sure that the existing of hydrocarbons in this part of the world is very much, we are very much sure about that. And there are so many areas not explored so far and so many geological targets never drilled, which means that there is potential for the future, not for now. All that, you'll see that there are resources rather than reserves, which means that could not be produced in a year or two, but perhaps 2030 or so. But if we start with Greece, and we'll see that the last 10 years, some blocks have been awarded, the potential from these blocks are estimated by different studies to be around 70 to 90 TCF, which means 2,000, 2,500 BCF, which is a considerable amount. But the point is that in Greece, there are no drilling activity the last 40 years. Why? Lack of potential of political support, bureaucratic obstacles, and moreover, some interesting environmental concerns, not all the time, but from time to time quite difficult to be ignore them. Recently, the Greek government has changed its energy policy. It was announced that during that PTEC conference held in Athens 2 months ago, and they are supporting strongly hydrocarbon exploration. So we are thinking that the exploration works will be resumed by ExxonMobil and Chevron, the Americans who are here, and they are joining Hellenic Energy and Energia. Here, may I tell you something that perhaps is not very well known, that most of the people believe that ExxonMobil is interested for Ionian Sea and Block 2 recently. I can confess that ExxonMobil was working together with Hellenic from 2014, not now. And they didn't come because there were some technical risks which have been resolved by shooting seismic by Energean and Hellenic, and now are there. And the main question here is why ExxonMobil is not going to drill in the blocks which are west of Crete. 2D and 3D have been shot there. There are excellent geological structures, but there are delays by ExxonMobil. Why? Perhaps we'll find out the answer later on. Quite importantly is that the Greek government published the Maritime Special Map last summer with the maximum EEZ of Greece, which if it is so, it is bordering with Cyprus. Of course, this is not accepted by Turkey yet. Turkey has also published another map, which is based on Mavi Vatan Blue Homeland political vision, which divides the Aegean Sea into two. And in the western part of that, the Turkish government has awarded blocks to TPAO, the Turkish public company, which in turn has sought seismic surveys in that area. And not only that, TPAO recently applied for more blocks from Crete to Rhodes from Turkish government. I'm not going to judge if it is illegal or not. It's up to every one of us to understand or not. Also, Turkey is threatened Greece that if extends its territorial waters from 6 to 12 nautical miles, it will be a cause of war, a casus belli. In Libya, after the decline of Gaddafi's regime, the main companies we know left. They came back and now they resumed operations. What is important there is the bid round, which opened in March of that year, and more than 40 companies have applied to be there. Applied to be there and have been accepted. And something more is that NOC, the National Oil Company, has signed MOU with TPAO and ExxonMobil for G&G studies, not exploration and production. Some numbers, I'm not going to spend time on that. Quite important also is the MOU between Turkey and Libya, we know that, but the MOU between Libya and TPAO for these areas fully respect the median line between Greece and Libya, and actually the blocks which were released by the Greek government. And this is contrary to the MOU between Turkey and Libya. Just keep that in mind as well. For Egypt, there are so many discussions. Nicholas told us about that. The thing here is just to tell you that Zohr, Zohr was a great surprise during its discovery, opened new routes for us for new geological concepts. The first world, the discovery world, was a surprise. No one would imagine that. Then the development was really fast, but now it's underperforming. This is another case study which will be released over the years to come, because the way that the production is done by Eni is not according to the best oil field practices, and the reservoir is strongly damaged. And of course, this is causing to Egypt a lot of problems because of the social policy they were following all that years for cheap gas in the country. Now they need to import gas, and there are, of course, some new discoveries like the one in Nefertari by ExxonMobil. New blocks have been awarded in the majors, in Chevron, ExxonMobil, Shell. New wells will be drilled. So Cairo will be happy, I think, in years to come that they will see the gas production again to be at the higher levels. In the meanwhile, they have delimited their EEZ with Greece, partly not up to the borders with Turkey, and this is because Turkey, with Cyprus, sorry, and this is because Turkey is protesting that with their views. In Israel, following the Tamar and Leviathan discoveries, the giant discoveries, new discoveries by Energean, and the development of these fields by Energean and Chevron are very much promising. Israel is and will be exporting country with a lot of routes for export, not only to Jordan and Egypt, but the main project here is the East Med pipeline to Cyprus and Greece. Lebanon is the new player at the very end of the Levantine basin, promising seismic so far. The main thing here is the maritime agreement for the borders with Israel, mediated by US, and of course the ratification of the Cyprus-Lebanon EEZ borders. In Cyprus, all of that have been so far referred. I'm not going in details on that to save some time, but let's see some seismic sections. These are seismic sections, real, but at different processing stages and at different vertical and horizontal scales for confidential reasons. One of those is Zohr, the other two are from Greece, and the fourth one is from Cyprus. You can see, even for those who are not geologists or geophysicists, that there are some very similar events, which means that Zohr is not just the Zohr, but there are so many geological structures in the area, in the vicinities of Cyprus and around Crete, which means that more gas is there. And of course, this is the final map, just to tell you that with the white lines are the EEZ of Greece and Cyprus, according to UNCLOS, is not those which is respected by Turkey awarding blocks to TPAO. And by coincidence, the memorandum of the EEZ between Greece and Egypt is terminating here at the 28th meridian, up to their TPAO has sought seismic. And this is a map where is showing the blocks by the local players, Hellenic, Energean, and TPAO, plus Chevron and ExxonMobil. The new here that I would like to point out is that ExxonMobil signed an MOU with TPAO for exploration in Black Sea and Mediterranean, in Libya, perhaps, and a recent statement by the US ambassador in Turkey that the Caspian, the fossil fuels from Caspian cannot go further because are blocked to Med. where Greece and Turkey are the gateway, and US is to serve as a bridge, which means that the geopolitics and the US administration is very much involved in the area, and there are so much to see in the years to come. So again, the map with now some numbers, which are the reserves and the resources, totaling up to 10,000 BCM, which is a rather nice number for exporting to Europe and for the years to come. But I would like again to tell you that for me, the stake are not mainly the gas, but hydrates. There is no, as we speak, technology to produce it and make out of the methane hydrogen. But look at the resources. This is a paper from Ankara University, estimating that the resources to be up to 100 BCM. The rest are 10,000. Here is 100, 10 times more than that. So I think this the next play, and this is the stake for all the hypotheses that will be done by not only for the country, from the countries, but also from US or other major players in the region. But of course, all that would be different if the international law applies. I'm afraid that we are living in a period where all these principles on which we were lived so far are under question. And we should very much be very, very, very positive that without the international laws, no security, no peace, no prosperity, but we have to fight for that. Thank you so much.
I find myself, regrettably, if you see what I mean, agreeing with you, Yanis, in that you need to have international law. And I really worry about the increasing lack of interest, shall we put it bluntly, on the part of major countries with concerns in the region with regard to international law. And let alone if the issue is not absolute clarity. And one regrets that when it comes to the UN Committee on the Law of the Sea, there is not absolute clarity on the issue of whether or not Greece and Cyprus share a common line in terms of their exclusive economic zones. But I'm wondering whether you have any further thoughts on Mr. Barak's comments about the Caspian and its energy being blocked, because there are, of course, plenty of transit routes through Georgia which reach Turkey, and there is a prospect of a new transit route via Armenia and the Zangezur corridor. Do you really think that Caspian energy is being blocked, or do you think the blockage as such is lack of investment upstream?
John, I fully agree with you. I think that this statement by the diplomat was not correct, or if it was correct, it's something that we are missing.
Yes.
There are so many routes from Caspian fossil fuels to be transferred to Europe or to other markets, and the Mediterranean is not the area that will block them. Something else this guy would like to tell us. And actually, this is quoted, okay? I didn't change any, even
no,
a
I
comma.
understand.
So for me, it was just an excuse for him, or something, or perhaps President Trump has other thoughts that are beyond what we can imagine. So Really, I'm with you. I cannot give any answer on that.
That's fine. Now, do any other of our panelists, anybody from outside? We do have one question that has come up, which is, do you think that Turkey should become part of a pipeline route for gas reaching Europe from the Eastern Med? Do you think Turkey should be a transit system for gas from the East Med to Europe?
If you like my answer, no. Could be, if you see the map, somebody could say that yes, this could be a pipeline onshore instead of onshore through Turkey going to Europe instead of be an offshore pipeline connecting Cyprus and Israel with Greece, which is technically challenging. But if it is so, then it is another really difficult issue to be answered, not from Greece, but from European Union. And this is the security of supply and how the divergence of different sources, how they could go to from domestic production to EU. If everything goes through one country, like Turkey, then it will be another one question at political level from security of supply for Europe. So it's something that must be answered in the future. But so far, as we speak now, the reserves discovered in East Med are not enough to support that pipeline. The reserves, the resources that will be, and I'm saying I will because I am confident that the geological structures around Crete, based on the seismic sections that I have seen, and having worked on the geological concepts, are there. It remains to be drilled and discovered. Then it is another story which is not for now. It is for the years to come.
Yanis, thank you very much, not least for bringing us back to the practicalities of developing infrastructure to serve the East Med. Our next speaker, I'm hoping, is Dr. Amit Mor from Israel, where we have the one clear case of a major producer now, albeit one that has some constraints in terms of where it can export its surplus produce. So Amit, the floor is yours, and I'm hoping that you're coming up now.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you, Kostis, the IENE, for bringing us together. Thank you for this important report that you put together. It is very timely and eye-opening. A few comments that I'd like to share with you. These days, we are on alert in Israel and the region as a whole for a possible attack of the US. Mr. Trump is possibly promising to the Iranian people. So we might be on the verge of another round. So what we are speaking so much about energy security of supply, oil prices increased by 7% in the past few days, declined today. For possible, the political risk increased, the insurance and costs of shipping in the region increased, hauling costs, and so on and so forth. So as you know, when we discussed in previous discussions, Israel halted twice the supply of gas from some of its fields during the war. Tamar field at the beginning of the war 2 years ago, and then the Leviathan and Karish fields, and so on and so forth. It affected especially Egypt and especially Jordan. who suffered lack of gas to electricity production and so on. So that's the situation, and this will prevail in our region. Now, a few words about gas that was discussed heavily. And here I assert that the East Mediterranean will not be a source of supply of gas to Europe in the foreseen future. The modest reserves that Israel has and Cyprus will serve the region itself. As discussed last month, Netanyahu approved the gas export deal, large gas export deal of $35 billion, 130 BCM from the Leviathan field to Egypt. And this is going to be most likely the last export deal that Israel, the large deal that Israel will supply the region. So Egypt and Jordan. Jordan is 70% of the electricity production generated from gas from the Leviathan field. Egypt, 15% of the gas in Egypt is from Israel these days. Egypt, as discussed, with a major shortage of gas, importing 10 million tons of LNG this year, anticipated. I don't see the foreseen future Egypt reclaiming its role as an energy exporter, not in the next few years. It's declining fields, although new fields are coming on board. It will, in 4 or 5 years, with the second phase of Leviathan, it will import from Israel about 20 BCM per year, 1/3 of its consumption these days. So, and the Aphrodite and Kronos fields from Cyprus will also serve Egypt. So generally, Israel will start importing gas, in my forecasts, towards the end of the next decade. The reserves that Israel possesses will serve Israel for another 20 years, unless additional gas reserves will be found, and this is questionable. So vis-a-vis gas, I don't see the region as an exporter of gas to Egypt, to Europe. The gas will serve the region itself, especially Egypt. Now, the bully in the room, Mr. Erdogan and Turkey, is in many respects hindering the development of the Cypriot gas sector, except for Kronos and Aphrodite, which are in regions below the proclaimed EEZ of Turkey. So I don't see more fields or additional reserves being developed unless Mr. Erdogan or Turkey will allow it. And he is in a very military manner just hindering the development and additional exploration, as we saw in the past. What is very interesting to note is the connection of the East Mediterranean, which currently it's connected with grid, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Syria, part of Syria, in northern Lebanon, with the Arab gas pipeline, which was constructed more than 20 years ago. And this pipeline stopped at Homs. Now, this last summer, Turkey connected the city of Aleppo, Haleb, to the Turkish grid. And Aleppo is just south to Kilis in the northern Syria. And Aleppo, since August, the power station there is consuming Azeri gas. Now, I believe that in 2 years, this extension between Homs and Aleppo towards the Turkish border will be constructed. And then, in fact, the Turkish grid or the European grid is, in fact, connected to the Eastern Mediterranean grid. So not that Israeli molecules will go north. They are already going north towards Syria, as we understand. It is called Egyptian gas or Jordanian gas. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, it was published that the Egyptian gas company signed a deal with the Syrian gas company and with the Lebanese electricity company to supply Egyptian gas. But Israeli gas is going southwards toward Egypt via Jordan in this pipeline these days. So of course, these are going to be Israeli molecules, so we circulate project. But once this pipeline is connected, so in fact, we might see very interesting projects or deals. This is hedging or back-to-back deals between Israeli companies, Turkish companies, European companies. The molecules are not going to be Israeli, but the prices are very important because right now the price in Israel is $4 to $4.5 per million BTU. In Jordan and Egypt, exported gas is about $6 to $7 per million BTU, and the current prices in Turkey and Europe are 12 plus minus dollars per million BTU. These are also the LNG prices. So what it will cause is an increase of the prices of gas in the Eastern Mediterranean. So interesting things in the future, if there is more gas from Azerbaijan, currently I don't see there, so it can go southwards as well. So this is very interesting in this respect. Next, sorry. Look at it's not our latest, but the demand for electricity in Israel, our very unique country, only 2 sources of fuels, natural gas and solar energy. Israel does not have any other renewable energy sources. And we are phasing out gas totally by next year, and that's all. So it's a major achievement from 80% coal and 20% oil in power generation 20 years ago. This year, it's going to be 3-4% coal. So phasing coal totally due to the gas, and renewables are penetrating already 16% and will be 30, 40, 50%. A major source of that contributes to the huge increase in electricity demand in the country is the rush to build more and more data centers. So because of the cheap gas prices and cheap electricity prices in the region, more and more international companies are constructing data centers. And a data center, a medium-sized data center, consumes electricity like a medium town. And what does it mean? What does it mean? It means that Israel is exporting its gas via the utilization of the international companies which are using data centers that exhausting the gas resources more quickly. And that's why gas price will increase in the country, also electricity prices. So basically, I am standing here before trying to convince the Israeli government not to allow so many international companies to construct data centers for AI and other utilizations, because in this respect, we are just exhausting our modest gas reserves more quickly and exporting our gas very cheaply, because it doesn't bring any employment or other major benefit to the country. So this is another thing to think about. Now, what is also very important all around the region is the renaissance of nuclear energy. So we are viewing the development of the nuclear plants in Egypt and in Turkey and other Middle Eastern. Saudi Arabia is interested. Israel is interested also, is not a signatory of the NPT, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, but Mr. Trump might allow possibly Israel this technology and so on and so forth. So this is another thing which is important, supply of electricity in the region and all around the world, I believe also to supply data centers and so on and so forth. Now, the Great Sea Interconnector or the Eurasian electricity line was discussed. Again, as I mentioned, I think the major hindering factor right now is the policy of Turkey and Mr. Erdogan. So here I urge Greece. The European Union is relatively weak. Indeed, to go ahead with this pipeline is to connect Crete right now with Cyprus and later on possibly with Israel and Egypt. So this is a political issue which is very, very important. But as Turkey is claiming this part of this area of the electricity line should be constructed as part of its exclusive economic zone, I think it is very, very important, and this electricity interconnection should go ahead, especially for Cyprus. It's very important because they're paying the highest prices of electricity in the world, most likely because they're using oil for power generation. I don't see any gas supply from the region to Europe, but what I think is in the long run is very promising in the framework for IMEC, that's the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, which Mr. Biden and now Mr. Trump continue to promote as part of the interconnection, especially the trains and shipping via Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, from India, and so on, to the Mediterranean, either via Syria or Israel, and so on. Also, electricity. I think that we are studying the hydrogen economy very deeply. It is the green hydrogen or blue hydrogen economy does not make any sense yet, at least not in the foreseen future, where gray hydrogen costs about $1 per kilogram and green hydrogen $10 per kilogram. And I don't see in the near future that green hydrogen is coming to parity. So it doesn't make any sense to produce hydrogen in Saudi Arabia or in Egypt and export it to international market and to Europe. But it is making a lot of sense to produce solar and wind energy in the desert in the Middle East and transfer it via DC lines via the Mediterranean to Europe. So exporting electricity, green electricity from the region, from Egypt, Saudi, Jordan, Syria, to Europe, it will take a long time. But if we are talking about supplying energy from the Middle East via the East Mediterranean to Europe, so indeed, I think that renewable energy export, not via hydrogen, but via electricity, this is the issue. So I'll stop here and thank you again for listening.
Amit, thank you very much indeed. I'm looking around for questions. At the moment, I can't see anything on the chat forum. So I'll ask you one question, which is that you referred and you stressed the role of the Arab gas pipeline and its ability to carry, amongst other things, Israeli gas directly or indirectly up to Syria. But it also brought into question the fact that you were saying it was carrying Egyptian gas. So we have Egypt both as an exporter and as an importer. Do you think that Egypt's own requirements for a considerable increase in imports means that, in effect, it cannot be relied on to be an exporter for gas up to Syria?
No, of course, the gas is going to be Israeli gas. I mean, the deal, the commercial transaction, since Israel cannot export gas directly to Syria or to Lebanon. So it is called Egyptian gas or Jordanian gas, might be, and then because at that pipeline, Israeli molecules are supplying Egypt. So basically, no doubt it is going to be Israeli molecules already, as we understand, are flowing north from Jordan via our pipeline to Syria. And the next stage to Tripoli, northern Lebanon, the power station. And so it can be called, can be a deal between the Egyptian gas company and the Syrian gas company or the Lebanese electricity company. But actually, these are Israeli gas, and the payment, it is a circular deal. Eventually, the suppliers from Israel, Leviathan field, Chevron, and its partners will receive the money either from a Jordanian company or from Egyptian company. This is less important. But what we see here is that once you have infrastructure in place, it can play both, the gas can flow in both directions in different times. So, and that's the benefit of the issue.
We do actually have a question now, which is, you've mentioned that you think that taking into account existing resources, Israel may become constrained in terms of gas supply. But do you think Israel has got a prospect of discovering new resources in its EEZ?
Yeah, good question. So basically, the government is about to publish its fifth tender, international tender. And the last tender, only one consortium led by SOCAR of Azerbaijan plus BP and Israel's they are participating in exploration, will participate. They have 7 years to start actual drilling. And most of the geologists, geophysicists that are expert in the region, they're claiming that there is no likelihood for finding large deposits like Leviathan or Tamar in the future, possibly small deposits. And in fact, in the past 12 years, the only company which drilled was Energean, Greek company, Greek-British company, Energean, and they found very small deposits of several BCMs each. So it's a major question mark, and if not, so as we are pushing the government to start, to prepare, to plan for gas importations in 12 years' time.
Thanks very much, Amit. That's very clear indeed. Much appreciated. Our final speaker is Julian Bowden, former economist with BP and now with the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies. And Julian is, I think, going to bring the subject back to the East Med in general, but also, I think, including perhaps the Black Sea. Julian, if you're there, over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. We changed our internet to fiber this morning, and we should get a speed increase. But where I'm sitting, we've had a speed decrease. So for the sake of safety, I think, and to try and make this work, I'm going to turn the video off to try and give me a bit more bandwidth. And I hope that's okay. So can you still hear me all right?
Yes, indeed, we can.
Hello?
We can hear you very clearly.
Good. Well, tell me, please, immediately if you can't. I'm going to talk about two things, really. One is Egypt, and the other one is the Black Sea. And I'll come on to why the Black Sea in a moment. But I'm going to go fairly quickly because I realize we're heading towards time constraints. And I think a lot of what I could say on Egypt has already been covered very eloquently, in particular by as a conclusion by Charles, when he said you can't really see much. You can't really see any LNG coming out of Egypt. And I think, looking at considering the first presentation that we had on the study, I think perhaps the trouble with all studies is how long are they relevant for, and I think there are already some areas where the study is perhaps needs adjusting. And I think one of the adjustments it needs to make is not focusing on the upstream, but focusing more on the market. And this idea of the Eastern Mediterranean being a resource that can push out gas to Europe, when there is already an existing market in the Eastern Mediterranean, and by that I primarily mean Egypt, means that the local markets needs do need to be considered before you see what might be available for exporting. Egypt's in big problems. It's got this huge production crisis. If we look at the data for the last just 4 years, production has collapsed by 40%. 40% from 2021 to 2025. It's a huge amount of gas. We've got data for 10 months through 25, so we've now got almost the full year, and so nothing's going to change. It's down 40%. What the Egyptians did to achieve balance was through only supply side interventions, in other words, importing LNG and importing more pipeline gas from Israel. There were no interventions made on the demand side. The demand side has been pretty much flat through this period. Imports of pipe now and LNG, pipeline and LNG gas meet about a third of Egyptian demand, up from almost nothing in 2020. So in just in 4 years, huge transformation in the way that Egypt sources its gas as a result of its own production crisis. But there's a converse as well, in that the dependency of Israel on one market is now extremely high. Israel this last year will have supplied about 15% of Egyptian demand.
To wave,
No,
I want to point out Julian has deliberately turned his camera off. It's deliberate because he's got wavelength problems, bandwidth problems in his system.
So as long I've got no slides, so as long as you can hear me, I guess that's okay. Which create there's a mutuality, therefore, in this relationship between on gas between Israel and Egypt. On the one hand, Egypt needs Israeli gas. On the other hand, Israel needs the Egyptian market. In a situation where they really don't like each other. At the moment, for Israel, there are no alternatives to Egypt. Lots of talk. LNG to Cyprus, floating LNG, pipe to Europe. But nothing so far. So pipe to Egypt for Israeli export monetization is the only game. I'm ignoring Jordan in this because the exports to Jordan are relatively small. Last year, though, I think perhaps the big event in Egypt was almost a non-negative one in that production stabilized. So the big drop looks now over. Production last year, 25, was flat. But it's obviously a big magnet for gas and is pulling gas in from Cyprus. But the volumes from Cyprus won't happen in any significant way this side of 2030. What else is going on then in Egypt? There is a policy push to accelerate renewables with help from the Gulf developers and money, and also nuclear. Nuclear was mentioned just now. There is the prospect of the first unit. The Egyptians are still saying the first unit should come on next year. No, sorry, later this year. We shall see. A lot of these things are being delayed because both the Egyptian nuke and both being developed by the Russians. So there are issues of sanctions. Certainly Turkey, but at the moment they actually, both of these plants are due to put their first unit on stream next year. So renewables and new will make a difference, but on the demand side for gas, I don't see them really contributing to on the to do something about eating into gas demand. So I think the conclusion is for Egypt, as we look at the numbers now, is that not much will change this side of 2030. So nothing for Europe from Egypt. If it does manage to isolate Cyprus gas, or Cyprus managed to isolate its gas and monetize that gas through the Egyptian LNG plant, then I think that is that Egypt is still importing gas from one source, the international market, and managing to export a little bit of gas, the Cyprus gas, but on a net basis, it doesn't make a difference to the position we're seeing today. So Egypt, I think, I don't see any difference really. I think in the way when I see Egypt from sitting here in the UK and doing my analysis, I don't see any difference from in particular of Charles, no LNG to Europe, forget it. Returning to the Black Sea briefly, which we haven't talked about today, I think the question is why? Why Black Sea important to the Eastern Mediterranean? Why is it relevant to a discussion about the East Med? And I think the key reason is market. That one of the market pulls for Eastern Med gas in the first instance would be Southern Europe. If Eastern Med gas does go to Europe, it is likely to go perhaps in any pipeline gas would hit Europe in. Now the main target market, the only target market for Black Sea gas, not the only market. The main market for the Romanian gas is, and the main target for Bulgarian gas, which we have discovered this year into Southern Europe. Discoveries have already been made. If we look at the map, Net Sea, the Bulgaria, Sakarya are all actually in the same fairly small geography. So what we have probably a fairly substantial, in aggregate, what we have here is a fairly substantial basin that is becoming more significant. Project taking shape. Sakarya is now on stream. It has solved its initial production problems and ramping up reasonably quickly now. Neptune in offshore Romania should be on stream in 2027. Bulgaria is drilling now, and I think players involved in Bulgaria, the same Petrom from Romania is doing Bulgaria. they should know the rocks, and I think the risk on this is probably reasonably low. Infrastructure exists, market exists, so all this can be put into market quickly. Now, so that's a good story for the Black Sea. But then the question comes, well, okay, well, that's fine, we'll include it. But what is the impact of the Black Sea on the Eastern Med? And I think you could say, some people might say, well, it's negative. It's a competitor for market space. Eastern Med will have to compete. Black Sea is going to get there first. No space for any Eastern Med gas. So it's going to squeeze the Eastern Med out. I think that's one way of looking at it, but I would prefer to see it as a positive addition to anything from the East Med, in that it will improve overall market liquidity in Southeast Europe. It has potential for helping to create a real pricing point in the region somewhere. The potential for joint use of infrastructure, existing infrastructure. In other words, it gives more reach. More gas gives more reach. And so when I look at this, I see that there are more positive benefits from activity in the Black Sea than there are negative impacts. Southeast Europe certainly needs gas. It is still a major consumer of lignite. So therefore there is, through gas, a decarbonisation opportunity, a fairly rapid one. So far, only Greece has made any significant reductions in its lignite use. Lignite remains important in the energy systems of Bulgaria, Romania, both of which are EU, of course, and also Serbia. I think this overall position of the Black Sea and how important it is for a larger definition of what the Eastern Med is. I think maybe NewMed has realized this. It is now a partner in the Bulgarian offshore. Maybe this is a portfolio decision of NewMed. Maybe it's just a business opportunity that they want to see. But I just wonder if they see actually that there is a way of seeing these two regions being a more integrated whole. So the conclusion I would say on the Black Sea is that it will certainly help shape how and determine how Eastern Med gas comes to market, if it does, if it ever does. But I think we are looking at a 2030 timeframe. I think the idea of these European MOUs, which we mentioned earlier on in this session, that where does Europe find gas from in a non-Russian gas supply world, and the talk of the MOUs with Algeria and Azerbaijan and more from Norway perhaps, those are clearly going to come to nothing, at least this side of 2030 also. So really the only new gas for pipeline gas for Europe in the foreseeable future is actually from the Black Sea. So I think with that and that kind of I think plea really that an East Med analysis does now need to include the Black Sea. I think with that I will stop. Thank you.
Julian, thank you very much indeed. I've one quick question and then hope we can get to a discussion briefly. Is there any prospect, do you think, that Egypt will address its own gas issues by reducing, if not terminating, subsidies for energy within Egypt?
That's the several $1 billion of question, isn't it? So far, Egypt has not made any demand side interventions in solving its gas supply problem through price in any kind of meaningful way. I mean, so it has been astonishing, really, that as the supply crisis in Egypt worsened, there were not more attempts to do something about this. We have seen limited shutdowns of petchems in particular, but these don't, on the data I've seen, they don't really seem to have made any dent in on overall demand. I mean, Charles may have a richer perspective on that, being closer to the being in the region, but everything I see on Egypt on the gas side has been, on the supply side, on LNG, get that, get those imports up, and more pipeline from Israel, and more pipeline to come from Israel. So
Kostis,
certainly lots of talk about that Egypt needs to do something on gas prices to try and control demand, but it isn't happening yet.
Thank you, Julian. Kostis, over to you if you want us, or shall we just continue on this particular topic?
I think as we have just 10 minutes left, I think we should carry on this topic, because the presentations, the last 2-3 presentations, were especially useful and with lots of new insight, especially the connection between Black Sea and the East Mediterranean, which I find fascinating, and we've been thinking about this for some time. It's pointless to discuss East Med without Black Sea. I don't know whether vice versa holds, but that's my initial impression. And I'm glad that Julian Bowden brought this subject up. Yes, I would suggest that we carry on this along this direction, because now trying to do a roundtable discussion, I think there's not much point, because we have so much new information and new feed coming into the scene. What do you think, John?
I was going to ask, first of all, Charles or Nicholas, or both of them, what they thought might be the future for domestic reform within Egypt regarding energy. Are they there, Charles and Nicholas?
Yes, I'm here. I couldn't agree more on what it has been said personally. So there has been some announcements regarding the government efforts to correct the situation and progressively lift the subsidies. But from what we observed, as Julian said, I would say the focus is on volumes than on prices, on securing external volumes to cover than on prices. Then maybe it's important to highlight also that banks and financial institutions, through their outlooks, which are released at the end of the year, so in 2025, I have been assisting to many outlooks, stressing out the need for Egypt to proceed with those announcements and correct some market distortions that come with these subsidized gas prices domestically. So I'm not sure if Charles he has a very deep knowledge on that, so maybe he can bring some extra elements, but there is a need. And of course, there is also, we shouldn't forget from this financial and price perspective, the enormous ethics stress that Egypt has seen coming with US LNG imports, and the tremendously increased inflation rate that faces right now. So for sure, there is need for more efforts regarding subsidies, but I don't see that coming immediately, despite the alerts.
Thanks, Nicholas. Thank you very much indeed. Is Gökhan Yarden still online? Because if so, I was going to ask Gökhan what he thought about the prospects of long-term supplies via Kilis southwards into Syria from suppliers to Turkey, notably Azerbaijan.
Yes, we continue to supply natural gas to Syria. So I have the figures in until end of November, it is around 300 million cubic meters we supplied until the end of November. And you know that the Arab gas pipeline, when I was the CEO of Potash, I negotiated with Egypt to pipeline to deliver gas to Turkey. At that time, it was 4 BCM. So, but Amit left the, I think, conference. So there might be connections and realization of that project. So we don't know which molecules, because Turkey, for example, imported, I think, in August and July this year LNG from Egypt, but we don't know whether it is an Egypt LNG or Israel LNG. So nobody knows which the methane molecules is it. So coming to the Syria, we continue to deliver gas to Syria. So what I told in my presentation, it is a matter of connections and systems. So whether it is an Azerbaijani gas or Syrian gas or maybe Russian gas, nobody knows it.
Gökhan, thank you very much indeed. Charles, did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, let me come back on to this Egyptian question, because for the whole of the East Med, really the factor, the big player is Egypt, and there are three strands. First of all, there is the production, and then there is the internal consumption and renewables. In terms of production, there is a vast potential in the western part of ECZ, which is completely unexplored. And ExxonMobil is showing strong interest in that area. Recently, ExxonMobil acquired 2 new blocks in that part of Egypt CZ, as well as Chevron. They want to expand their operations there. But for Egypt to unlock that, they need to do 2 things. First of all, they need to pay off their dues to the oil companies, which are a perennial problem, but also to raise the prices they pay their gas suppliers to the same level as are now paying to Israel, based on the latest agreement to import gas from Israel. In other words, about $7.50 per million BTU. And I say that because both ExxonMobil and Chevron, in their latest pronouncements, made it clear that they have set the profitability level to unlock new projects at high. They have vast choices and limited amounts to invest. I mean, take, for example, Chevron. They have vast new interests in Guyana, more in North America. They're about to take over Lukoil's business. All of them highly profitable. If they're going to invest in Egypt, Egypt needs to make it profitable by increasing prices. Egypt can also reduce consumption internally by raising the price of energy, but that politically is a dynamite.
They remember what happened to Morsi with energy problems, and I don't want to see that again. But Egypt.
Charles, can I let Amit get a quick word in before our time is up?
Let me just put this we haven't said much about renewables. Let me just put that in. Egypt is trying to do something about renewables. It has just approved 2 massive projects, about $2 billion to increase renewable production. Increase renewable production. Okay.
Amit, do you want to come in because you haven't had a chance?
Yes, well, I agree with Charles and the previous speakers. The key player in the region, no doubt, is Egypt. And as we understand, they will need to import a lot of gas in the upcoming years. And that's a major investment project of Chevron and its partners right now, about $3.5 billion in phase 2 of Leviathan, $2.5 billion, another $1 billion in additional pipeline via the Negev, the desert to Sinai. So basically, Egypt is going to be supplied with Israeli gas via 3 pipelines: a submarine pipeline to El Arish in Sinai, via the Arab pipeline via Jordan, and additional pipeline which will be constructed in the next 4 years. So I don't recall who said that. Indeed, Israel is putting all the eggs in the Egyptian basket. It's another risk, to basically to export all your gas to one country, which the regime might change there in the future, and so on and so forth. So this is some kind of risk that Chevron and their partners are taking. Less the country itself, that's Israel, because okay. So if there's going to be a political risk materializes, so the gas will remain in Israel, that's not a problem. So in this respect, in 4 years' time, I think that about 1/3 of the Egyptian gas consumption will generate from Israel.
Okay. John? Hello, John, can you hear me? Thank you, Amit. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, we hear you.
Good. Okay. I think more or less we have reached the end of the webinar. Now, I'd like to say a few thoughts, to express some thoughts. I think we've seen that all countries in the region are active. They are producing gas, oil, electricity, but the amounts are limited. They cover part of their own needs, the exception, of course, being Israel, that already exports to Egypt and Jordan and could export a lot more. Turkey is an important crossroad. I mean, it is the energy hub of the region, without any doubt. And they managed to export to other countries, including Greece. Greece has been importing gas from Turkey many years. They export gas to many other countries in Southeast Europe through TurkStream. Egypt was exporting until recently, but now the balance has changed, as Nicolas Degleris and Charles informed us about. And all countries are more or less concerned with the next day and what to do and how to develop further their infrastructure. However, the region, and I think we have to admit that, is still at a political dead end. We have points of eruption in Israel, that is Gaza. We have volatile situation in Iran, which affects most countries in the region. We have tensions between Turkey and Israel and Turkey and Greece to a lesser extent. Tensions which fortunately have not culminated in any episode. But I think there is a lot of restraint from all sides. And this shows, I think, the way ahead. That is, although we have an opportunity to develop the region well, because the region is rich in all sorts of forms of energy. At least this is what study has said. This is what we heard today. We need to develop much closer political cooperation and diplomatic relations. So I think the key is to upgrade the cooperation, try to overcome the various tensions. If we do that, then I think the region will take off. See what happens in the North Sea. Because there are no tensions between UK, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Germany, which all have offshore interest, North Sea has developed extremely well and has exported to the rest of the world and Europe. In a way, East Mediterranean could become that way, but we need to address these issues. For example, I think that the day should come where Turkey should join the East Med Gas Forum. That day will, I think, signal a new era in the development of the region. I'm not saying that it's an easy way forward. I'm not that hopeful in the immediate future, but I remain hopeful in the long term. And I think the fact that we are around this table today, all of us talking about these issues, despite the differences, is a very comforting thought. And on that note, I would like to close the webinar of today. I would like sincerely to thank all participants for putting a lot of effort and informing us on all these areas. We, from our side, we're going to put together all the presentations we have and the video. And fairly soon, over the next few days, we will inform you of the availability. So it will be there for all to see and access and see how a group of people in this part of the world and a little further beyond have come together and have stated their willingness and their positions to work together to try and help this region emerge in the European scene as an energy player. So thank you so much.
Kosti?
Yes.
Kosti, may I?
Yes.
Do we have 3 minutes? Just
well,
because if it is so, if not, okay. But I would like to raise something which we didn't touch. And what is this? Is that in our countries, Greece, Libya, Egypt, Israel, Turkey, there is a civilization for more than 3,000 years.
Right.
And there is something very common on that. And if I may, can I try to share my screen and you'll see a part of presentation that I have done in Cairo back in 2012. It was a very interesting discussion about geology. And so can I, Kostis?
Go ahead quickly, because we've passed the time and the technicians inform me that they want to shut down.
Okay. So do you see my screen?
I cannot see it.
Come on.
We can see you, but not the screen.
But not the screen. Now?
No.
Oh. Come on. Πάω στο Zoom. Ναι. Ναι. Εδώ. Τώρα. Α, και πατάω το share. Οκ. Ναι. Come on. Γιατί δεν φαίνεται. Sorry. Συγγνώμη, πατάω share screen. Οκ. Ναι, ναι. Ναι. Έχω διάφορα παράθυρα, αλλά και το share. Τώρα. Okay. Okay, sorry for the delay, but this is the question that it has been asked to the participants at Cairo meeting, how we could connect Europe, Greece, the Southeast Med, Libya, Egypt, and all that. And of course, everybody was talking, as we were discussing today, with LNG carriers, with pipelines. So the question was that if we add there a pretty woman, a jealous wife, a cow, and a horsefly, which is the answer? And the answer comes back from ancient Greece. If we travel back 2,500 years before, and at Argos is a nice city in Peloponnese, was living a pretty woman. Her name was Io, as we pronounce that in Greek, Io. And you know that the Greek gods were as we are today. They fall in love, they hate each other, they had all what we have today as human beings. So Zeus was the godfather, and he was very much known for the love stories he had. So Zeus fell in love with beautiful Io, and Io soon was pregnant. Hera, jealous wife, was very much angry about that, and so Io was in trouble. Zeus tried to save her and transform her to a cow. So Hera, what to do, sent a horsefly which started biting Io. And Io was start running from Argos to the western part of Greece and went all the way to the north. And the sea was named Ionian Sea after her name, Ionian Sea. And then Io continued trying to avoid the horsefly and went to where Istanbul is today and passed to the other Epirus. And how we call that passage, it's called Vosporus, which is the ancient Greek word Vos, Poros, which is the cow passage. And then you continue along the eastern part of Turkey today, and the area there is called Ionia, again after her name, and passed all the way down to Egypt. And when she came down to Nile Delta, however, the horsefly was dead. Io, pregnant, was about to give birth, and so Zeus transformed again to a woman and gave birth to a boy called Epaphus, who married one god Nile's daughter, Memphis, and they had a daughter called Libya. Libya was raped by god Poseidon, raped, of course, okay, and they had two twins, Agino, king of Syria, who had a daughter, Europe, who came to Europe by another story, and Belos, who had another two child from a god Nile's daughter, Egyptos, and which is king of Egypt, and then now king of Libya. And this short story, based on a compilation of Greek myths, give us another view of how culture and civilization could apply. Sorry for the interruption, Kostis. But I think that this is another part of discussion that the whole region is connected with civilization and culture as well.
Okay, so the next webinar or conference will be devoted to archaeology and
there are so many myths.
Mythology, Greek mythology, and energy.
Of course there are.
Have fun presenting the various gods and their whims. So thank you very much, Yanis, for this nice ending. And this puts a joyous touch to our get-together. So thank you again, everybody. Have a nice weekend tomorrow and the days after. And very soon we'll get together, because on February 5th, we are launching the big report we have been preparing for the last 2 years, the Southeast Europe Energy Outlook, where several partners from EU had the opportunity to contribute and work. And we're going to have a presentation about lunchtime in Athens at the Athens Exchange, but it's going to be online. It's going to be free to attend. So we will let you know in due course, so everybody will be able to follow this presentation and other interesting things which are happening over the next few months. So good night, and have a good weekend afterwards. Thank you. Thank you,
everybody.
Charles. Thank you, Yannis. Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Nikos Zegleris, John Roberts. And I don't know if there is somebody else I missed. I'm sorry, I can't see you. So good night again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.